That's it. That's enough. Fire Mike Tomlin. Morning to you. Good Sunday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Ravens 28, Steelers 14 here in Baltimore last night. The scene in the M&T Bank Stadium visitors' locker room was just awful. Awful. It wasn't even the norm. It wasn't what you'd expect after a tough loss, guys being down, guys being inconsolable, guys having their heads down for extended periods, although there was a lot of that. Guys were hurt. Guys were physically, they were sore. They'd gotten beaten up. And we're going to have, you and I, all summer, or at least as much of it as you're willing to commit to listening to a program like this, to talk about what went wrong in the game, specifically in the first half, in this losing streak that ended the season, going from 10-3 to 0-5, going from a top 10 offense, at least in a couple of categories, to that, what you saw, going from a top 10 defense to getting just embarrassed. Yeah, that term gets overused a lot in sports. That was an actual embarrassment. Deshaun Elliott put it the best. He said that was belt meets, in parentheses, behind. And the number of people who were responsible for it is exactly the number of people who made the trip. Everybody. There are no exceptions. There's no who's to blame individually or who's most to blame or who's least to blame or who deserved. No. This was just, even by the standards of the Steelers' recent playoff abominations, this was the lead abomination. And that seldom happens unless there are a whole lot of participants in that process. But there's been one common denominator through all of it. And that includes the regular season successes, just as it does the regular late season failures, just as it does this sort of thing in the playoffs. And invariably, when it comes down to it, when it's the biggest games, the ones that involve the most prep, the ones that involve the most creativity and dynamism and aggressiveness and counterpunching as a punch, this team delivers this kind of result. And that is not conducive either to winning a Super Bowl or toward building up in the direction of a Super Bowl. My firm belief after this game, and those of you who've been kind enough to listen to me or to read my work online will know that I've been patient, that I've been open-minded, that hopefully I've been fair to this head coach. But what I can't be convinced of after this broader outcome, meaning this collapse, and that's what it deserves to be called, a collapse, is that significant change shouldn't follow. Within that, I can't be convinced that there would be significant change unless that also includes a change at head coach. I feel like for me, this has gone in layers. I'll have a year in which I say, hey, this offensive coordinator's killing them. Change the coordinator and let's see how they do, because there are certain things that Tomlin does well. Okay, the coordinator was changed, and early in the game last night, Arthur Smith showed real signs of those boats being burned, at least in terms of schematics. He tried different things. They didn't work. But how much of that was Smith's designs and how much of that was, say, for example, Tomlin being unable to hire an offensive line coach who's worth anything since the departure of Mike Munchak? Think about that. Think about the impact that had on this season. Defensive coordinator, as we've been saying for the longest time, and he really hasn't denied it, is Tomlin in a de facto way. And this was a non-de facto disaster from that standpoint. Remember, one of the things that I had warned you about in advance of this game was that if the Steelers were going to accordion, meaning come in from the sides, on Lamar Jackson, the Ravens this year, unlike in other recent years, are equipped to move forward through that. And boy, did they do that. 299 rushing yards, not yards, rushing yards. And the reason for that is that the Steelers stuck by their same plan that they've utilized for several seasons. And that's to have their edge rushers, TJ Watt, Nick Herbig, Alex Highsmith, collapse on the running back. In other words, they come in from the sides, make sure that Lamar Jackson doesn't escape to either side, but then come in on the running backs. Well, guess what? John Harbaugh and his staff, they actually thought of something. And they thought that if and when the Steelers were to invariably do this, Lamar was going to make a read. Lamar was going to see, here comes TJ, and he's going right at Derrick Henry. So when I see that, I'm just going to keep the ball myself and go running. And guess what? When he did, as a result, he ran wild and free and as far as he wanted. And this lasted into the second quarter and then into the third quarter. And then James Harrison, sitting on his couch somewhere, presumably, lashes into the coaching on his social media account and says, "What are we doing? Are we not going to react to this?" I mean, everybody can see what it is that they've done in relation to what our outside linebackers are doing. And Harrison, of course, is speaking from voluminous experience and expertise, having been that guy for a long time. TJ was asked about the same thing afterward, and TJ's response was, we do what we're told. I have so many more examples, but again, I also have so many more months to go over all of them, and I promise you we will. This was epic, but it was also enough, plenty enough. Art Rooney can't stick his head in the figurative sand anymore. He can't say things like he said a year ago, that meeting in the office I was sitting in, about how he's tired of this. It's time to start winning these games. And then watch not just an isolated event, not just one night here in Baltimore, but 6 whole weeks of prequels. So much has to change. I'm not exempting the players, as I've made clear. I'm not exempting the assistant coaches or the coordinators, but I am sure as hell not exempting the head coach anymore. That's enough. When we come back, J1Q. Before we get to J1Q today, I approached Larry Ogunjobi. He was sitting at his stall, head down into his hands, elbows on his knees, barely budging. There was a lot of commotion around him, as you'll be able to hear on this audio, but not from the 99 stall. Got to pick your spots as a reporter for things like this because, you don't want to be the bad guy. It's a tough moment, obviously. And at the same time, the athletes, especially the veteran athletes, tend to understand we have a job to do. I'm speaking just for myself, deeply empathetic for what they go through. But this is less than a minute, and I want to share the entire exchange with you.
What your emotions are right now? Obviously, you guys got off to the great start.
Sucks, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be one and done. But you just got to work, man. You got to take it, you got to digest it, and then just got to be better, man. It sucks, man.
Defensively, I mean, did it feel like they were kind of attacking up the middle? Because the way you guys usually come at them from the sides, do you know what I mean? I'm so sorry, Cam.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It was just...
I hear you.
That wasn't the only conversation like it that I had. Stanton Smith has today's J1Q, and he asks, DK, this feels like Groundhog Day. We can all sit here and say fire Mike Tomlin and the coordinator, sell the team, trade everybody, and whatever else is being said these days, but nothing's going to change. And we're going to see the same thing again next year, aren't we? Why does the organization seem to be okay with this long playoff win drought? These are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let that sink in. It's the definition of insanity that we're doing the same thing year in and year out and expecting something different. And it's the same thing every year, I feel, since Dan Rooney passed away. Stanton, there's a lot of emotions that are going to be coming from all across the nation. That's with a capital N, Steelers Nation. A lot of that's already been sent in this direction, including your own. And in this moment, please take this the way it's intended. I'm thinking more about the players. I'm thinking more about the participants. I'm thinking about Patrick Queen could barely function after this. TJ Watt just, I don't even want to know. Cam Hayward got banged up pretty good. Head injury, would not stop playing. I can't even imagine what he told any of the doctors who would have said, no, we're not going to let you back out there. And Landon Roberts, you might remember, was a guest on this program at midseason. So talkative, so upbeat, so everything that you'd want somebody like him to be. Just when I mentioned his name, he was facing the other direction, and he turned around and his eyes were just real big, and he wasn't going to have anything to say. And I just asked him how he was, went about the rest of my business. The one thing I want to make clear before this episode ends is that these players cared. There was no lack of want to. There was no lack of camaraderie. What there was a lack of communication, stuff that you really ought to stop talking about. What, say, mid-August at St. Vincent College? There was a lack of cohesion, notably on the offensive line. There was absolutely a lack of accountability. There was Cam Sutton again last night, getting burned all over the place by Isaiah Likely. There was Beanie Bishop, the player that the other players wanted to have out there on the field with them, just standing on the sideline. It's a pyramid. All of this is a pyramid, and it all works its way up to the same point. That's my point today. That's enough. That's enough.